Good evening. This is the 7th attempt to record the introduction for our meeting of Tewkesbury Historical Society on the 24th of March 2022. We're very grateful to Kirstie Bingham, who is our speaker tonight, who is taking the place of our speaker on dendrochronology, who will come in November of this year. We're also delighted to see our members coming out now as the evenings are becoming lighter. We have our technician from the Methodist Church, Peter, and we hope that expat members will be able to see the talk and my introduction via our website and on YouTube. Guests are always welcome here, and you can become a member by paying only £5, which means the next meeting we have will cost you only £2.50. We always offer free refreshments after the talk. Anne is usually in charge of us, but she's having a hospital appointment, therefore is in isolation today. So Sue, her friend, is in charge, and she's brought along her own friend, inevitably another Sue, and we're very grateful to your help. One privilege of being the president of the society is that I try and attend funerals of people who have worked with us in the past. Today, sadly, it was the turn of John Talbot, who is an excellent photographer of the waterways of Tewkesbury, and he gave us a talk last November on this topic, which was most enjoyable. But it's only later that I found out he was a clarinetist and an accordion player. These things we don't know, of course, until it's too late. Sam and I also attended the funeral of our past chairman, Chris Donald, and Sam is helping sort out the probate on her historical assets, and she's very kindly, her executors are very kindly made available to members to collect which books interest them during the meeting tonight. We've also lost John Pocock over the winter. He took on transcribing lots of documents into the PC, onto the PC, so we can use in our Woodard database, and we're very grateful for John for doing that. And also in April, on the April 11th, I'm to attend the funeral of the widow of one of our founder members, Cameron Talbot. I've kept in touch with her for the last 20 years, and she got to her 90th birthday very well, but sadly died soon afterwards. So that will be April the 11th. The big news is that our bulletin, so beautifully illustrated by Rick Talbot, is selling very well, and we've had to order more copies. Inflation has hit us. We had to pay £1 each more for these copies. But tonight we can offer to members at £8 and guests at £10. Whereas there'll be another £1 will be added to the internet cost of buying them. And they'll be available during refreshments as usual. The museum is also waking up after COVID, and we're holding periodic talks at Trinity on a Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. And the next one is on the 5th of April. As you can see, our esteemed town crier, Mike Keane-Price, will be our lecturer. He is also a very keen historian the military historian. He's going to give us a talk on a deserter who became a hero. I follow on the 19th of April, and I'm going to be talking about Tewkesbury's formerly smelly tanneries. The one below you can see is a famous one from Marrakesh, which is notoriously smelly. But on the bottom right, you can see an area which used to be a tannery in Tewkesbury, which changed its role and now is completely different and is no longer smelly. The Yankee University keeps going on monthly on a Tuesday from noon till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Loz, the landlady, very kindly gives us a free finger buffet. And our next talk on the 5th of April will be Mysterious Alleys and Innovative Council Housing. Do come along to that if you so wish. The community is very busy trying to stitch a history of Tewkesbury. And you can join in the activities this Thursday coming at the Roses Theatre, and anybody can add a stitch. I've already added 2, not very expertly, but do go along to join that and have a good stitch and natter at the same time with the people working there. I've been a little bit upset about our MPs not forcing the civil service to issue more visas for Ukrainian refugees and make it easier for them to escape this terrible war. We have to say that our own MP Lawrence Robertson is going to give an evening on the 31st of March at the Mezban restaurant in Church Street at 7 p.m, which will include an Indian buffet. Tickets for the fund will be £25. And if, like me, you can't go because you've already got an occasion that evening, you can send in your donation for this very worthwhile appeal. I think it's very difficult in history, isn't it? How do we make sense of what is happening around us? How do we do it reliably? And that's difficult. I subscribe to the BBC History magazine, which has many good points about it, but does tend to be rather woke in its attitude to the empire. But in its website, it's featured an American professor, Sarate, who's written a book about so-called NATO aggression entitled Not 1 Inch. I have learnt something new thanks to Joan Jennings, who posted this very moving photograph of a statue in Ukraine, which recalls this new word, Holodomor, which I'd never heard of before. So I've looked at the Encyclopedia Britannica. It's a man-made famine that resulted in millions of deaths in the 1930s. Now, I'm well aware that Stalin had a policy of industrializing agriculture in Russia in between the two wars. And the idea was to take the land off peasants called kulaks, who could raise and sell their own food for profit. He turned it into an industrialized system whereby the kulaks had to work for wages and the government exported their harvest and made money for communist projects. Ukraine is, of course, famous for being the main wheat raising area in Russia, and the grain was seized off the peasants and was sent to Russia and abroad to earn foreign currency. The Ukrainian resistance was very strong indeed, and of course quite violent at times, and as a result lots of them were deported to Siberia and they were replaced by Russian-speaking people. And of course today it's quite an issue that in the eastern provinces of Ukraine may indeed go towards back to Russia, not back to Russia, but to be awarded to Russia. We never know how many people are killed in a famine, but the latest estimate is about 5 million people lost their lives there, which is a not too distant memory for Ukrainian people. The other issue, of course, is NATO's expansion, or aggression, as Putin would call it. And Professor Sarate asked the question, did we miss a precious window to make peace in the 1990s? And there you can see a very sad-looking, or aggressively looking, Putin with Bill Clinton. And the whole issue, Putin, of course, says that NATO is aggressive. We don't see it as an aggressive alliance. We see it as a defensive alliance. But we have to look into Putin's mind. And it goes back to a discussion in 1990, before the Soviet Union collapsed, between the then Secretary of State and Mikhail Gorbachev about what would be the future of NATO. It was a discussion. It was never recorded, and there was no treaty based upon this discussion. But Putin takes the fact that NATO would not expand in the former states of Soviet Russia, and he took that as a promise. It was more messy than that. And the phrase is not 1 inch. To him, it means not 1 inch of Russian territory will become part of NATO. It had the opposite meaning to the Americans, and it became not 1 inch of territory needed to be off limits to NATO. In other words, it could expand. It was supposed to be done in a partnership for peace, whereby post-Soviet states like Ukraine could affiliate with and then gradually gain NATO membership in phases. But it didn't work out like that. The US did a U-turn under subsequent presidents and chose to embark on a more aggressive form of NATO expansion, aggressive in the eyes of Putin. And that's when, of course, the Baltic states were allowed to join, and other former states of Soviet Russia. And Ukraine was possibly on the way to becoming a member, but as you know, that never happened. And that's why we're not fighting to defend the Ukraine. Our next meeting will be in a far-off territory, which is Anglo-Saxon Britain. Our new secretary has a friend, David Pegg, who's has a great affection for the Anglo-Saxon history, and he's going to be telling you about King Edward, his favourite Anglo-Saxon king. Now, I know nothing about King Edgar, so I'm looking forward to increasing my knowledge on that evening. Simon Lawton, Kirstie's leader at the John Moore Museum, has sent us this photograph. He wants us to identify it. I'm struggling a little bit, but I think it could well be the former Abbey Lawn House, also known as the Mayor's House from John Halifax Gentleman, which was demolished in the 1960s. The entrance looks very familiar, but the windows look to be different, although the windows could have been modified since the early 20th century when the photograph was taken until the period of demolition in the 1960s. We don't know, but if you've got any ideas, please let me know. So, Kirstie Bingham. I've always been a bit perplexed about Kirstie because I assumed that she was Scottish due to her accent. She's pointed out I would be wrong. She was born and bred in Berkshire, after which she went to Royal Holloway College in London to study history. It's a college that I came to know and regretted very much that I didn't study there, in contrast to the office block, which was the London School of Economics in the centre of London. However, in those days, it was an all-women's college. It's changed since those days, but it's in a delightful part of London. It was after university graduating that she went to Scotland to work in the museum service in Ayrshire and then the Robert Burns Museum. And I can only assume that she developed her accent while she was working there. She came to Tewkesbury in 2018 along with her accent, and she's been the education officer at the John Moore Museum for the last 4 years. And we're very grateful for her coming tonight to talk about education in Tudor and Stuart period, entitled Birch, Beer and Bibles. Kirstie, you're very welcome.